So Jackson's personality is very outgoing. Her parents are probably a little bit more reserved, but Jackson is the type that when you go to the park, she's going to go introduce herself to everybody else at the park. And she's one of those outgoing kids, and she loves doing anything outdoors, indoors, jumping around. She's just always ready to go and is never, she only has one speed, and it's all out all the time. So that's probably the best thing about her personality. And as far as hobbies, she loves to do anything dinosaurs right now. So dinosaurs are her favorite. We've gone through a couple phases, Mickey Mouse, but dinosaurs are now her thing. And
she can name quite a few species of dinosaur. I'm actually quite impressed.
Yeah, she's going to be pretty disappointed when we tell her that they were extinct many years ago, but she likes them for now.
So a little about ourselves is I'm Maddie Leonard, and this is my husband, Nate Leonard. We live here in Omaha, and we have a daughter, Jackson, who is 2.5.
Once Jackson was born, Maddie actually stayed at home, and I run a business with my father and brother-in-law here in Omaha. And it was fortunate enough, once we had Jackson's cystic fibrosis diagnosis, Maddie was able to stay at home, and she now takes care of Jackson full-time, and it's definitely a full-time job.
So Jackson, when she was about 8 days old, we got a call from her pediatrician that her newborn screening came back for cystic fibrosis. I think we got the call about that Friday, and they couldn't get us in until Monday. So we kind of had a long weekend of waiting before we could get in to do a sweat test, which is kind of the gold standard they use to diagnose cystic fibrosis. So we went in that Monday, and the sweat test came back positive for cystic fibrosis. I think within a couple days they called us back to let us know, and it was a hard diagnosis to hear, but we had very good doctors that were very, let us know that it was not an end all. What you read on the internet isn't the current standard for kids born today with cystic fibrosis. So that was very comforting to us. But, with any child, when you don't hear that they're perfectly normal and healthy, that can be difficult. Especially that first day, the people that stuck out to us the most was, of course, Dr. Thomas, who is now the lead doctor at the clinic. She's always just been that steady force, and she normalizes it so much for us, which we always appreciate. And then there's one respiratory therapist we met there. Her name's Winnie, and that was kind of a dark day.
Yeah, and it was a tough first day of diagnosis, but Winnie at the clinic was just so uplifting and fun.
It was probably a good 3, maybe almost 4-hour visit. That was like that first day that we went in to meet our doctors. The lowdown of stuff when they were like, here's your treatments, here's these enzymes you have to do for like your newborn that you're just learning how to feed. There's no way to not make that day not stressful. And we just had the respiratory therapist who came in, which was probably the most overwhelming part that day. She came in to show us how to do the chest percussions, and I'm literally like, you're making me feel like I'm beating my newborn right now. But Winnie was just, sometimes energy is just so contagious, and it was definitely felt that day. The positivity from her, she actually made us laugh. So we will always be grateful for that. Typical treatments for Jackson are she does her daily chest physical therapy every day, and that includes 2 30-minute sessions on a therapy machine that kind of break up the mucus in their lungs. And with that, she gets some treatments to help open up her airways while she's doing that. And then for anytime she has to consume a meal or a snack, she does enzymes. And then currently we just got on one of the gene modulator drugs called Orkambi. So we've been on that for about 6 months now. For the most part, Jackson's pretty compliant with the treatments for her cystic fibrosis. Does she love them? I wouldn't say so. She enjoys watching TV and such, but as she's getting older, you know, she's developing more of that independent personality and making decisions. So sometimes it does get difficult. She'll want to turn the machine off, and it's not always enough encouragement to keep her going. So we try to let her kind of dictate that, because I don't ever want her to experience a negative reaction with her treatments. But for the most part, she's a good kid, and she it's such a part of her routine that she knows she has to get it done. I kind of attributed when Jackson was born, it felt very much like you were grieving. It's very difficult in the beginning, but over time, it gets easier to swallow as you kind of get the treatments under control and the doctor's appointments start getting more used to that. It made it a lot more manageable. But I would also say once COVID-19 hit, that was kind of like, once we got our feet under us, that kind of felt like the rug was pulled out once again. And, you know, the country kind of locked down, which cystic fibrosis families kind of already were used to being isolated. So that wasn't too new to us. But as far as how contagious it was, how it would affect a person with cystic fibrosis in the beginning, it was a little unnerving at times. But, you know, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation did such a great job collecting data, you know, keeping up on how people with cystic fibrosis were doing with the COVID-19 virus. We felt very safe once we learned that most kids and adults were doing just fine with the virus. And the CF community also did just a good job of outreach and keeping everyone up to date. So my favorite thing about Jackson is she has a very strong curiosity side, and I don't know what age it was, but we took her outside and we found a little anthill. And ever since then, she is obsessed with ants. So I actually laughed. That was the first time I think this kid gave me a break, was whenever I could find a small ant in the house and I would point it out to her. And she would follow that thing around forever until eventually maybe it would escape, or that unfortunately she would probably squish them in the end.
One of my favorite things or memories about Jackson so far is when we kind of transitioned from liquids as a food to more solid foods. And I remember Maddie had left the house, and I was in charge of feeding Jackson, and for some reason I was making something, and I just happened to saw some pickles in the fridge. So I grabbed a couple pickles out and fed Jackson a couple pickles. And with cystic fibrosis, one of the cravings is salt, because there's a lot of salt. You need to replenish the salts within your body. And so Jackson immediately took upon these pickles. And I think Maddie got home from wherever she went, and she's like, "What Jackson have for dinner?" And I'm like, she had 5 pickles. Yeah. and so ever since then, she's just been into pickles. And
yeah, we do the frozen pickle icicle pops. She cannot get enough of pickles.
Yeah, there's something called pickle ice, which is a frozen pop ice popsicle. And these are for bikers who are marathon runners or long distance biking. And she eats pickles and pickle ice popsicles.
Even in the winter.
Regularly. The only time we say no is just about 8 a.m., it's kind of like
a little early for pickles.
Do we give her a pickle before 8 or not? So that's one of the things that she loves.
I think my hope for Jackson would be that she would be able to live, as normal of a life as possible with her diagnosis. You just hope for any child that they grow up and, live the life they want to live and not have to be restrained by, her daily treatments or getting sick. And so I think just any parent's hope is just that their kid grows up happy and, thriving. And that's all we would ever wish and hope for Jackson. So when Jackson was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis when she was born, it was something Nate and I didn't hesitate to become a part of, finding a cure and helping raise funds for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, because this is such a great time in this age of the foundation actually being really close to finding a cure. And when I think back to, how many years ago the diagnosis wasn't so great for families, and just how brave parents were back then to start this fundraising and donating and starting the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, it just felt like a natural thing to try to carry on that legacy for those parents. So Jackson, if you're watching this and you're 22 now, I assume the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation has a cure and your cystic fibrosis is no longer an issue. But if not, I just want to tell you how proud I am of you. And
yeah, Jackson, if you're watching this 20 years from today, I'd love to say that we're sitting here and we all found a cure for you.
We just want to thank everyone for coming tonight, and we will hope you will join us in making a contribution to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation to help continue their fight for a cure.
On behalf of our daughter Jackson, we thank you again.